Hi there. My name is Alex, and today, I want to take you on a journey unlike any other. It's not just my story but a detailed roadmap for anyone dreaming of mastering English. Trust me, I've been where you are struggling, doubting, and wondering if fluency was even possible. Like so many of you, I felt overwhelmed by the complexities of grammar, the challenge of pronunciation, and the fear of sounding foolish. But today I'm here, speaking, thinking, and living in English with confidence, proof that anyone can achieve the same. Let's go back to where it all started. I grew up in a small town, where English was a rare sound. My life revolved around my native language, and while I dreamed of traveling to distant lands and meeting people from different cultures, the language barrier made those dreams feel unattainable. At school, English lessons felt like battles. Even basic phrases eluded me, and I often wondered, why is this so hard? Why can others do it effortlessly while I struggle so much? But one day, my perspective shifted. I realized that English wasn't my enemy, it was the gateway to the world I dreamed of. That realization ignited a determination in me. I promised myself that no matter how long it took, I would learn English. It wasn't just about learning a language, it was about breaking through limitations and proving to myself that I could achieve what once seemed impossible. That promise to myself became the foundation of everything that followed. At first, I didn't know where to start. There were no language schools in my town, and online resources weren't as accessible as they are now. But what I did have was curiosity and a willingness to try. Through trial and error, I discovered 5 powerful strategies that not only taught me English but also reshaped my mindset. These strategies were my lifeline, and they transformed my approach to learning. Today, I'll share them with you in vivid detail, so you can see how they can work for you too. Let's rewind to the beginning. I grew up in a small, picturesque town surrounded by lush fields and quiet streets. It was a place where traditions thrived and life moved at a slower pace. But amidst the beauty, there was one glaring limitation: English was rarely spoken. My world revolved around my native language, which meant my dreams of exploring far-off places and connecting with people from different cultures felt like distant fantasies. From a young age, I was fascinated by the idea of traveling to cities I saw in books and movies, but the language barrier made those aspirations seem impossible to reach. In school, English classes were more a source of frustration than learning. The lessons were focused on memorizing grammar rules and vocabulary lists. While I tried to follow along, I could barely string together a sentence. My classmates seemed to grasp things more easily, and I often found myself falling behind. Every time I was asked to speak in class, my palms would sweat, and I'd stumble over the simplest words. It wasn't just the language itself that was difficult. It was the fear of being judged, of making mistakes, and of failing in front of others. I often asked myself, why is this so hard? Why can others do it while I struggle so much? I would watch movies or see people on TV speaking fluent English, and it felt like they belonged to another world, one that I could never be part of. It wasn't just about understanding the words. It was about the confidence, the rhythm, and the ease with which they communicated. They made it look effortless, while for me, every sentence was a battle. But then, one ordinary day, something extraordinary happened. I was flipping through a magazine, and I came across an article about someone who had learned English entirely on their own. This person had no formal education, no access to teachers, and yet they had become fluent. Their secret? Dedication and a willingness to try new methods. It was a light bulb moment for me. I realized that English wasn't my enemy, it was the gateway to the life I dreamed of. From that day forward, I made a decision I would learn English, no matter how long it took or how hard it felt. That moment was the start of something incredible. I promised myself that I wouldn't let fear or doubt hold me back. It wasn't just about learning a language, it was about proving to myself that I could overcome my limitations. I decided to see every mistake as a step forward, every failure as a lesson. That promise became my guiding star, and it has stayed with me through every challenge since then. At first, I had no idea where to begin. Resources were limited in my small town. There were no language schools, no tutors, and online resources weren't as widely available as they are today. But what I did have was curiosity and a willingness to experiment. I started with the basics, trying to pick up words and phrases wherever I could. It wasn't a smooth process, far from it. There were days when I felt like giving up, when progress seemed too slow to matter. But every time I felt discouraged, I reminded myself of why I started. I pictured the life I wanted, the doors I could open if I mastered this skill. Through trial and error, I discovered 5 powerful strategies that not only taught me English but also reshaped my mindset. These weren't just learning techniques, they were life lessons. They taught me patience, perseverance, and the importance of celebrating small victories. Today, I'll share those strategies with you in vivid detail, so you can see how they can transform your journey as they did mine. Let's take that first step together. Then, one day, everything changed. I realized that English wasn't my enemy, it was my key to unlocking the world and transforming my future. I remember vividly the exact moment this realization struck me. I was sitting in my room, flipping through an old magazine, when I stumbled upon a story about a man who had learned English entirely on his own. He didn't have access to tutors or fancy resources, yet he achieved fluency through sheer determination and creative methods. It was a light bulb moment for me. For the first time, I saw English not as an insurmountable obstacle but as a bridge to a better life, a life filled with opportunities, connections, and experiences I could only dream of. From that day forward, I made a decision that would define the rest of my journey. I would learn English, no matter how long it took or how challenging it might be. I promised myself that fear and doubt would no longer hold me back. I told myself that mistakes weren't failures but stepping stones, each one bringing me closer to my goal. This shift in mindset was powerful. It gave me a sense of purpose and a determination that I had never felt before. The first few weeks were tough. I had no idea where to begin. There were no English schools in my small town, and the internet wasn't as readily available back then as it is now. But I refused to let those limitations stop me. Instead, I turned to whatever resources I could find. I borrowed old grammar books from the local library, listened to English songs on the radio, and even tried to mimic the announcers on TV news channels. It wasn't perfect, and it certainly wasn't easy, but it was a start. One of the biggest lessons I learned early on was the importance of setting realistic expectations. I knew I wasn't going to become fluent overnight. Language learning is a journey, not a sprint. So, I broke my goal down into smaller, more manageable steps. Instead of focusing on mastering the entire language, I focused on learning a few new words each day. Instead of worrying about perfect grammar, I concentrated on being understood. Each small victory, whether it was successfully ordering food in English or understanding a line from a movie, gave me the motivation to keep going. As time went on, I began experimenting with different methods to find what worked best for me. Listening became a cornerstone of my learning process. I spent hours each day immersing myself in English through radio shows, podcasts, and movies. At first, I understood very little. The words sounded like a blur, and I often felt frustrated. But I reminded myself that this was how I had learned my native language as a child, by listening and absorbing. Gradually, my brain began to recognize patterns, and those once incomprehensible sounds started to make sense. Another breakthrough came when I started thinking in English. At first, it felt unnatural and awkward. My thoughts would come to a halt as I searched for the right words. But I stuck with it. I began narrating my daily activities in English, saying things like, "I'm making coffee," or "I need to go to the store." Over time, this practice rewired my brain to process English more naturally. The more I thought in English, the less I relied on translating from my native language, and the faster and more confident I became in conversations. Speaking was perhaps the most intimidating part of my journey. I was terrified of making mistakes and being judged. But I soon realized that perfection was the enemy of progress. I started recording myself speaking on different topics, listening back to identify areas for improvement. It was humbling but incredibly effective. Each recording was a snapshot of my progress, and over time, I could hear myself becoming more fluent and expressive. I also sought out opportunities to practice speaking with others. Whether it was a quick chat with a tourist or a conversation with a fellow learner, every interaction was a chance to improve. I even turned everyday situations into practice opportunities. For example, if I received a wrong number call, I'd use it as a chance to practice polite phrases like, "I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong number." These small moments added up and helped me build confidence. Writing became another critical component of my learning process. I started keeping a daily journal where I wrote about my thoughts, experiences, and goals in English. At first, my sentences were simple and riddled with errors, but I didn't let that discourage me. Writing gave me the time to think about how to structure sentences and expand my vocabulary. Over time, my entries became more detailed and polished, and writing in English began to feel as natural as writing in my native language. Through all of this, the most important lesson I learned was the power of consistency. Progress doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen when you show up every day, even if it's just for 10 minutes. Whether it was listening to a podcast on my way to work, jotting down new words in my notebook, or practicing a dialogue from a movie, I made English a part of my daily life. These small, consistent efforts added up over time and transformed my skills in ways I never thought possible. Looking back now, I realize that the journey to fluency isn't just about learning a language. It's about discovering your potential, embracing challenges, and proving to yourself that you can achieve anything you set your mind to. So, if you're just starting out, remember this: every step you take brings you closer to your goal. Celebrate your progress, no matter how small, and never let fear or doubt hold you back. You've got this. At first, I had no idea where to start. I didn't have access to fancy courses or tutors. But what I did have was determination and a willingness to experiment. Through trial and error, I discovered 5 powerful strategies that transformed the way I learned English. These strategies didn't just teach me the language, they reshaped my entire mindset. And today, I'm going to share them with you in the most detailed way possible so you can follow in my footsteps. Listening was my first breakthrough, and it became the cornerstone of my learning journey. Think about it: how did you learn your native language? By listening to the people around you, absorbing the sounds, the rhythms, and the context in which words were used. That's exactly what I did with English, but this time, I had to create that immersive environment for myself. Every night, I tuned into English radio stations. At first, it was frustrating. The voices seemed to blend into one another, and I understood barely 10% of what was being said. I'd often catch myself wondering if I was wasting my time. But I knew that consistency was key, so I kept at it. I let the words flow over me like background music, trusting that my brain was absorbing more than I realized. Slowly, things began to change. I started recognizing familiar words and phrases. The sentences that once seemed like an incomprehensible blur began to take shape. My brain started to pick up patterns, connecting sounds to meanings, and before I knew it, I was comprehending full sentences. This transformation didn't happen overnight, but each small victory reinforced my determination. I realized that just listening wasn't enough. I needed to actively engage with the material. I began to take notes while listening, jotting down words or phrases that caught my attention. If I couldn't figure out their meaning right away, I'd look them up later and practice using them in sentences. It wasn't about perfection, it was about progress. Little by little, my vocabulary expanded, and my confidence grew. To make the process more enjoyable, I diversified my listening sources. I started watching movies in English, paying close attention to how the actors pronounced words and expressed emotions. I replayed scenes multiple times, mimicking the tone and rhythm of their speech. It felt awkward at first, but over time, I began to sound more natural. I also discovered the power of podcasts. They allowed me to explore topics I was passionate about while improving my listening skills. From science and history to storytelling and interviews, each episode became a new learning experience. Another technique that worked wonders for me was listening to music in English. Songs are a fantastic way to learn because they're repetitive and engaging. I would listen to the lyrics, sing along, and even analyze the meaning of the words. Music helped me grasp colloquial expressions and idioms that aren't always taught in textbooks. Plus, it made the learning process fun and less intimidating. The more I listened, the more I realized how much context mattered. For instance, I learned that the same word could have different meanings depending on how it was used. Take the word run, for example. It can mean to jog, to operate, or even to manage, depending on the context. Understanding these nuances gave me a deeper appreciation for the richness of the English language. Perhaps the most profound lesson I learned through listening was patience. At first, progress felt painfully slow. But I reminded myself that this was how I had learned my native language, by listening for years before I could form complete sentences. This realization gave me the confidence to trust the process and celebrate small wins along the way. Listening wasn't just a skill, it was a mindset. It taught me to be present, to focus, and to embrace the journey rather than rush toward the destination. You can do this too, and the best part is that it's easier than you think. Start by surrounding yourself with English in every aspect of your life. Create an immersive environment where the language feels like a natural part of your daily routine. Watch movies with subtitles, and don't just passively view them. Pause and rewind scenes to focus on how words are pronounced and used in context. Challenge yourself by gradually moving to movies without subtitles to hone your listening skills even further. Dive into podcasts about topics you love, from storytelling to science, so you remain engaged while absorbing the nuances of the language. Beyond media, make English a constant background companion in your daily activities. Play English songs while cooking or cleaning. Try learning the lyrics to your favorite tracks and sing along. Music not only makes the process fun, but also introduces you to idiomatic expressions and slang that textbooks often skip. If you're worried about not understanding everything at first, don't be. The goal isn't to achieve perfection immediately, but to immerse yourself in the rhythm and sounds of the language. Think of it as a child learning to speak for the first time. They don't grasp every word, but gradually learn through repeated exposure. Your brain, like a sponge, will naturally start picking up patterns and meanings over time. It's about being consistent and allowing your subconscious to absorb the language without pressure. To take it a step further, interact with the language actively. Create a mini routine where you note down phrases or expressions you hear and use them in your own sentences. For example, if you hear someone say, "It's a piece of cake," try using it in your conversations or writing. Actively engaging with the material helps solidify your learning and makes it practical. For me, movies became more than entertainment, they were classrooms. I would watch the same scenes repeatedly, focusing on how actors delivered lines, their tone, and the flow of their speech. Mimicking them felt awkward at first, but it was transformative. Over time, my pronunciation and intonation improved significantly. You'll notice that as you mimic and interact with English, your brain shifts from merely hearing the words to truly understanding and internalizing them. Remember, the key is to make this a daily practice. Immerse yourself fully and consistently, and soon you'll find yourself thinking, speaking, and even dreaming in English. For me, movies became a game changer in ways I never anticipated. They weren't just a source of entertainment, they were a dynamic and engaging classroom that taught me the subtleties of pronunciation, tone, and rhythm. I'd watch scenes over and over, paying close attention to how the actors delivered their lines. I analyzed everything: their pitch, the pauses between words, and even their facial expressions, which often conveyed emotions that added depth to their words. Initially, it felt silly to mimic them. I would sit alone in my room, repeating their lines in front of a mirror, trying to match not only their words but also their intonation and expression. But with each attempt, I grew a little more confident. What started as an awkward exercise soon became second nature. Over time, my pronunciation improved significantly, and I noticed that I was beginning to sound more natural and fluent. I discovered that certain genres of movies were particularly helpful. For example, romantic comedies often feature conversational English with plenty of idioms and casual expressions, making them ideal for learning how people speak in everyday situations. On the other hand, historical dramas taught me more formal language and enriched my vocabulary with words I wouldn't encounter in casual settings. By diversifying the types of movies I watched, I was able to broaden my understanding of different speaking styles and contexts. Another thing I did was mimic entire dialogues. I'd choose a scene with 2 or more characters and take turns playing each role, practicing their lines until I could recite them fluently. Sometimes, I'd even record myself performing these scenes and compare my speech to the original. It was humbling to hear the differences at first, but it was also incredibly motivating to hear my progress over time. This practice didn't just improve my pronunciation, it also helped me internalize common sentence structures and conversational patterns. Beyond pronunciation, movies taught me cultural nuances. I began to understand how tone and body language could completely change the meaning of a sentence. For instance, the phrase "Are you serious?" can sound accusatory, surprised, or amused depending on the speaker's tone and facial expression. These subtleties are rarely covered in textbooks but are crucial for sounding natural and connecting with native speakers. One of my favorite moments came when I was watching a comedy film with friends. A character used the phrase "It's not rocket science," and I instantly understood the humor without needing subtitles. That was a breakthrough for me, a moment when I realized how far I had come. Movies had not only improved my language skills but also made me feel more connected to the culture behind the language. Looking back, I realized that movies were more than just a tool for learning English. they were a gateway to a richer, more immersive experience of the language. They helped me overcome my fear of speaking, taught me to listen actively, and gave me the confidence to engage with English in a way that felt both enjoyable and empowering. The second strategy was learning to think in English, and it marked a turning point in my journey. At first, this felt like one of the most challenging steps. Like many learners, I had developed a habit of translating everything in my head from my native language to English before speaking. This process slowed me down significantly and made me feel hesitant and unsure of myself. Translating each word and sentence not only consumed time but also drained my confidence. Conversations felt like puzzles where I had to fit pieces together, often resulting in frustration. One day, I realized that if I truly wanted to speak fluently, I needed to rewire the way my brain approached the language. Instead of viewing English as a translation of my native language, I decided to treat it as a language of its own. I began experimenting with thinking directly in English, and while the shift was far from easy, it became one of the most rewarding decisions I made. I started small, narrating my daily activities in English. When I woke up, instead of thinking, I need to brush my teeth in my native language and then translating it, I trained myself to think directly, I need to brush my teeth. As I prepared breakfast, I would mentally describe what I was doing. I am boiling water for tea or I'm slicing an apple. Initially, this felt awkward and slow, but the more I practiced, the more natural it became. To make it more engaging, I turned it into a game. For instance, while walking outside, I'd look around and try to describe everything I saw in English. If I spotted a bird, I'd think, "That bird is flying," or if I noticed a shopkeeper, I'd mentally say, "The shopkeeper is arranging vegetables." This practice helped me build fluency in forming sentences, even if they were simple at first. Over time, my ability to describe my surroundings grew more sophisticated, and I began incorporating more complex sentences into my thoughts. Another effective strategy one adopted was setting reminders on my phone in English. For example, instead of a notification saying "Call Mom," I'd write "Call Mom at 6 p.m. These small changes reinforced my habit of thinking in English and reduced my reliance on translation. Gradually, thinking in English extended beyond simple descriptions to more abstract concepts, such as planning my day or reflecting on my emotions. I'd think, "What should I focus on today?" Or "I'm feeling happy because I completed a task." This deeper engagement with the language made it feel less foreign and more like a natural part of my mental process. One key breakthrough came when I started dreaming in English. The first time it happened, I woke up feeling amazed and proud. It was a clear sign that my brain was internalizing the language at a subconscious level. Dreams in English didn't happen overnight, of course. They were the result of consistent effort, but when they began, they signaled a significant milestone in my journey. A helpful tip for anyone struggling with this transition is to talk to yourself in English. While it might feel odd at first, it's an excellent way to practice thinking directly in the language. For example, if you're alone at home, describe your actions out loud: "I'm pouring water into the glass," or "I'm folding laundry." You can also have imaginary conversations, pretending you're talking to a friend or explaining something to someone. This practice not only improves your fluency but also builds your confidence in forming sentences on the spot. Reflecting on my progress, I realized that thinking in English wasn't just about learning new words or grammar, it was about creating a mindset shift. It required patience and persistence, but once I made the transition, I noticed significant improvements in my speaking speed, confidence, and overall comfort with the language. Thinking in English became second nature, freeing me from the mental blocks that had once held me back. I began with simple things: focusing on creating a mental environment where English felt as natural as my native language. When I woke up, I'd think, I need to brush my teeth, narrating my morning routine in my head. As I made breakfast, I'd mentally say, I'm cooking eggs and pouring tea into the cup. At first, this internal dialogue felt awkward and slow. I would often pause, searching for the right words, and sometimes doubt would creep in. Was I using the correct tense? Was this how a native speaker would say it? But with persistence, I began to realize that perfection wasn't the goal, consistency was. To make the practice more engaging, I started incorporating more complexity into my thoughts. Instead of simply thinking, I'm brushing my teeth, I'd expand on it, I need to finish brushing quickly because I have a meeting at 9 a.m. These richer narratives not only helped me build my vocabulary but also trained my brain to think in complete sentences, preparing me for real conversations. I made it a point to immerse myself fully in the language, challenging myself to describe everything I encountered throughout the day. As I walked through the streets, I'd observe my surroundings and describe them in English. The sky is clear today, and the children are playing soccer in the park. If I saw a store, I'd think, that shop is selling fresh fruit, and I can see apples and oranges in the display. This exercise not only made thinking in English a habit, but also turned everyday moments into opportunities for language practice. One of the most impactful strategies I discovered was talking to myself out loud when I was alone. I'd rehearse scenarios like introducing myself to someone new or explaining my weekend plans. Hi, my name is Alex. This weekend, I went hiking in the mountains and saw some incredible views. Saying these sentences out loud helped me practice pronunciation and fluency, and over time, my confidence grew. Even mistakes became valuable lessons as I learned to self-correct and refine my speech. Eventually, thinking in English became second nature. The process rewired my brain, allowing me to form sentences faster and more naturally during conversations. This internal dialogue wasn't just a tool for learning, it became a window into a new way of experiencing the world through the lens of a different language. With consistent practice and a willingness to embrace the discomfort of learning, I turned what once felt impossible into an integral part of my daily life. Here's a tip: make narrating your day in English a daily habit. Start small by describing simple tasks you're doing, like brushing your teeth or making coffee. Gradually build on this by adding details. Instead of just saying, I'm cooking breakfast, expand it to, I'm cooking breakfast with eggs and toast, and I'm planning to add some fruit for a healthy meal. As you go through your day, observe your surroundings and describe them mentally in English. For instance, if you're walking outside, think, the sun is shining, and the leaves on the trees are swaying in the wind. This practice trains your brain to process English naturally, without needing to translate from your native language. Don't worry about getting it perfect. The goal is to build fluency, not precision. Over time, your brain will adapt, and thinking in English will become second nature. You'll find yourself forming sentences effortlessly and even noticing improvements in your speaking and writing skills. The key is consistency. Make this a part of your daily routine, and the results will amaze you. Speaking was the hardest part for me, and it felt like an insurmountable challenge at times. I was terrified of making mistakes, of embarrassing myself in front of others, and of being judged for my imperfect pronunciation or grammar. It was a fear that paralyzed me, holding me back from truly engaging with the language. But here's the lesson that changed everything: mistakes are not failures, they are stepping stones. Every error I made was a chance to learn, grow, and improve. The more I spoke, the more I realized that each attempt brought me closer to fluency, even if it wasn't perfect. To overcome this fear, I started small and private. I recorded myself speaking on a variety of topics, starting with simple ones like describing my day or talking about my favorite foods. Listening to those recordings was uncomfortable. At first I cringed at every mispronunciation and awkward pause. But over time, I began to see them as a roadmap to improvement. Each recording helped me pinpoint areas where I could do better, whether it was enunciating certain sounds, choosing more accurate vocabulary, or speaking with a smoother rhythm. The act of recording and reviewing became a powerful tool in my learning arsenal. Another breakthrough came when I found a speaking partner. Practicing with a friend who was also learning English created a safe, supportive environment where mistakes weren't judged but celebrated as part of the process. We set ground rules: no switching back to our native language, no interruptions, and plenty of encouragement. These sessions were filled with laughter and trial and error, and they became the highlight of my learning journey. Even when I didn't have a partner available, I created opportunities to speak by role-playing different scenarios. For example, I pretended to order food at a restaurant or ask for directions in a foreign city, practicing the sentences repeatedly until they felt natural. One of the most liberating realizations I had was that speaking opportunities are everywhere if you're willing to look for them. I began turning everyday situations into practice moments. If I received a wrong number call, instead of quickly hanging up, I used it as a chance to practice polite phrases like, "I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong number." At stores, I made it a point to ask questions in English whenever I could, such as, "Where can I find the sugar?" These real-life interactions, however brief, built my confidence and made English feel less intimidating. As I practiced more, I started to notice subtle but significant improvements. My words flowed more easily, my sentences became more coherent, and the hesitation in my voice began to fade. Speaking wasn't just about the mechanics of language anymore. It was about expressing myself, sharing my thoughts, and connecting with others. The fear that once held me back gradually transformed into excitement and pride. Today, I can confidently say that speaking is no longer my weakness. It's one of my greatest strengths, and it all started with embracing the idea that mistakes are my best teachers. I started by recording myself every day. At first, I would pick a simple topic like my morning routine or my favorite meal, and record myself speaking for a minute or two. Hearing my own voice felt awkward initially. I cringed at every mispronunciation and pause. But I quickly realized that this discomfort was a crucial part of the process. Listening back to the recordings helped me identify specific weaknesses, words I struggled to pronounce, sentences that didn't flow smoothly, and moments where I hesitated. These recordings became a mirror, showing me not just where I needed to improve, but also where I was making progress. Over time, I pushed myself to tackle more challenging topics. Instead of describing my day, I tried summarizing articles I had read or recounting stories from movies I had watched. This forced me to think critically about vocabulary and sentence structure, while improving my ability to express complex ideas. I began to notice patterns in my speech: the phrases I overused, the grammatical errors I frequently made, and the words I needed to practice more. Each recording became a roadmap for improvement. As I continued this practice, my confidence grew. I started recording myself speaking for longer periods, gradually increasing from 2 minutes to 5 or even 10. I also experimented with different tones and styles, practicing how to sound more conversational or formal depending on the context. This not only improved my fluency but also prepared me for real-life situations where I needed to adapt my speech to different settings, such as casual conversations or professional meetings. Recording myself also helped me track my progress over time. When I revisited earlier recordings after weeks or months of practice, I was amazed at how much I had improved. My pronunciation was clearer, my sentences flowed more naturally, and my hesitation had significantly decreased. This tangible evidence of progress motivated me to keep going, even on days when I felt stuck or discouraged. To enhance this practice, I started incorporating feedback from native speakers. I joined online language exchange platforms and asked for constructive criticism on my recordings. Their insights were invaluable, helping me refine my pronunciation, adjust my intonation, and learn idiomatic expressions that made my speech sound more natural. These interactions also pushed me out of my comfort zone, as I had to engage in real-time conversations where I couldn't rely on the safety net of editing and re-recording. Today, recording myself remains one of my favorite tools for self-improvement. It's a simple yet powerful technique that has transformed not only my speaking skills but also my confidence and self-awareness. By turning every mistake into a learning opportunity and every recording into a step forward, I've built a solid foundation for fluency that continues to grow stronger with time. Another thing that helped was finding a speaking partner. I practiced with friends who were also learning English. We'd set a rule: no switching back to our native language. These conversations were full of laughter, mistakes, and growth. If you don't have a partner, try speaking to yourself in front of a mirror or role-playing scenarios like ordering food at a restaurant or asking for directions. Observation became my secret weapon and one of the most transformative elements of my journey to mastering English. I didn't just listen to native speakers, I studied them. I watched their lip movements, observed the way their facial expressions matched their words, and paid close attention to their gestures and body language. This level of focus helped me understand how much communication relies not just on words but on nonverbal cues, rhythm, and tone. Movies, TV shows, and even YouTube videos became my virtual classrooms. I would sit with a notebook in hand, pausing scenes to analyze how actors pronounced words, how they varied their pitch to convey emotion, and how they used pauses for effect. I didn't stop at simply watching, I actively engaged with the material. For every scene, I'd mimic the actors, repeating their lines over and over until I could match their delivery. It wasn't just about copying their words, but about embodying their emotions and expressions. This technique, often called shadowing, became a cornerstone of my practice. I started with short clips, often just a minute or two long, and replayed them until I could shadow the dialogue almost perfectly. At first, it was daunting. My pronunciation felt clumsy, and my tone seemed off. But with each repetition, I improved. Over time, I noticed that my speech was becoming smoother and more natural. Shadowing didn't just improve my pronunciation, it taught me the rhythm and cadence of English, helping me sound more like a native speaker. I also began observing conversational patterns. For instance, I noticed how native speakers used filler words like and to sound more casual, and I practiced incorporating these into my own speech to make it feel more natural. Watching how speakers transitioned between topics or responded to questions also gave me valuable insights into conversational flow. Another breakthrough came when I started focusing on cultural nuances embedded in speech. For example, a phrase like "Can you pass me that?" might sound straightforward, but the tone and emphasis can change its meaning entirely. These subtleties, which are often missed in formal education, became clear through observation. Movies and TV shows, especially those that focused on everyday life, were goldmines for learning these intricacies. As my confidence grew, I expanded my sources. Beyond scripted content, I began watching interviews, podcasts, and even live streams. These formats exposed me to more spontaneous, unscripted language, which was invaluable for understanding how people actually speak in real life. I learned to adapt my speech to different contexts, whether formal or informal, by emulating what I observed. Looking back, observation wasn't just a method for learning English, it was a way to immerse myself in the culture and context of the language. It allowed me to go beyond words and grammar, giving me a deeper understanding of how language is used to connect, express, and inspire. This process taught me that mastering a language is as much about understanding its nuances as it is about learning its rules. This technique, called shadowing, is incredibly effective. Choose a short clip from a show or movie, play it, and repeat the lines immediately after hearing them. Pay attention to tone and rhythm. It's like karaoke, but for language learning. Over time, you'll notice your pronunciation and fluency improving. Writing was my quiet ally, and it became an essential part of my journey to fluency. Every night, I would sit down with a notebook and reflect on my day. At first, my sentences were simple and straightforward. Today was good. I went to the park. I wasn't worried about grammar or elegance. My primary goal was to express myself, even if my vocabulary was limited. As I continued this practice, I began noticing significant improvements. My vocabulary expanded naturally, thanks to the words and phrases I picked up from other sources like podcasts, books, and conversations. My sentences grew more descriptive and detailed. Today was wonderful. I spent an hour walking in the park, admiring the vibrant golden leaves as they fluttered in the cool autumn breeze. Writing allowed me to take risks with language, trying out new sentence structures and expressions in a safe, pressure-free environment. Over time, I also discovered the power of journaling for self-reflection and growth. I began writing not only about my daily activities but also about my thoughts, feelings, and aspirations. For instance, I journal about a personal goal and break it into actionable steps. This process not only improved my English but also helped me organize my thoughts more clearly and effectively. Writing became a form of meditation, where I could untangle complex ideas and find clarity in my thinking. To push myself further, I experimented with different writing formats. I tried crafting short stories, penning letters to imaginary friends, and even drafting blog-style entries about topics that interested me, such as technology or travel. Each format challenged me to adapt my language and explore different styles of expression. For instance, storytelling required vivid descriptions and emotional depth, while letter writing helped me practice conversational language. Another powerful technique I adopted was reviewing and revising my writing. At the end of each week, I'd revisit my journal entries, highlighting recurring mistakes or areas where I could improve. I'd rewrite those sentences with better vocabulary or more accurate grammar. This process of self-correction was humbling but immensely rewarding, as it helped me internalize lessons and avoid repeating errors. One particularly transformative moment came when I started sharing my writing with others. I joined online language forums where learners exchanged feedback on each other's essays and stories. Receiving constructive criticism was nerve-wracking at first, but it opened my eyes to nuances I had overlooked. Comments like "consider using active voice here," or "this phrase would sound more natural if rephrased," were invaluable. Gradually, I gained the confidence to write for an audience, knowing my words could connect with people beyond my own notebook. Writing wasn't just a skill, it became a habit that empowered every aspect of my language learning journey. It honed my ability to express myself clearly, enriched my vocabulary, and built my confidence in structuring ideas. Through consistent practice, writing transformed from a daily exercise into a creative outlet that made me feel connected to the language and the world around me. If you're looking to unlock your potential in English, I can't recommend this habit enough. It's a journey worth embarking on. Over time, something remarkable began to happen. As I practiced regularly, my vocabulary naturally expanded in ways I hadn't anticipated. I started incorporating new words and phrases I had learned from various sources like podcasts, books, and movies. My sentences evolved from simple and functional to rich and expressive. Today was truly extraordinary. I ventured on a long walk through the park, where the leaves shimmered like gold in the soft autumn sunlight, and the crisp air carried the faint scent of distant chimneys. Writing offered me a unique playground for creativity, a space where I could test and refine my language skills without the pressure of immediate feedback. This transformation wasn't just about expanding my vocabulary, it was about learning to think in layers of meaning. For instance, instead of merely describing an event, I began weaving narratives around them. A simple journal entry about a walk turned into a meditation on seasons and change. Through this process, I discovered how versatile and nuanced language could be, and I found joy in exploring its depths. Writing also became a tool for organizing my thoughts and developing clarity in communication. When speaking, it's easy to lose track of an idea or struggle to articulate something complex. Writing allowed me to pause, reflect, and construct my sentences deliberately. For example, if I struggled to explain an abstract concept like gratitude in conversation, I'd write about it first. Gratitude feels like sunlight on a chilly morning. It doesn't change the cold, but it makes it bearable. These written exercises sharpened my ability to express ideas clearly, a skill that translated seamlessly to verbal communication. To deepen my practice, I experimented with various writing styles. I wrote poetry to play with rhythm and imagery, composed fictional dialogues to simulate real-life conversations, and even drafted persuasive essays to refine logical argumentation. Each style challenged me in new ways, forcing me to expand my linguistic repertoire and adapt my voice to different contexts. For example, crafting a fictional dialogue taught me the subtleties of conversational tone and pacing, while writing essays honed my ability to present ideas cohesively and persuasively. One of the most profound aspects of writing was its ability to illuminate gaps in my understanding. When I stumbled over how to describe a particular sensation or concept, it signaled an area where my vocabulary needed growth. For instance, when trying to describe the texture of a favorite dish, I realized I lacked words like tender or crispy. These moments of discovery were invaluable, prompting me to research, learn, and incorporate new words into my writing and speech. To make the process more engaging, I began setting themed writing challenges for myself. One week, I focused on describing emotions without using cliches, aiming to express feelings like joy, sorrow, or excitement with fresh perspectives. Another week, I tried writing short stories that included dialogue, setting, and character development. These challenges not only kept me motivated, but also pushed the boundaries of my creativity and language skills. Feedback played a crucial role in my growth as a writer. I joined online communities where language learners shared their work and exchanged constructive criticism. Initially, sharing my writing felt intimidating, but the feedback I received was transformative. Fellow learners and native speakers pointed out areas for improvement, such as word choice or sentence flow, and highlighted my strengths. This collaborative environment fostered a sense of camaraderie and motivated me to keep improving. Reflecting on this journey, I've come to see writing not merely as a tool for language learning, but as a deeply personal and rewarding practice. It has enriched my understanding of English, enhanced my confidence in expressing myself, and opened up new dimensions of creativity and self-discovery. Writing gave me the freedom to experiment, the space to grow, and the courage to share my voice with the world. If you're on your own journey to mastering English, I wholeheartedly recommend embracing writing as a cornerstone of your learning process. Writing also helped me organize my thoughts and refine my ability to articulate complex ideas. Often, when speaking, it's easy to lose track of what you want to say, especially if the conversation is fast-paced or emotionally charged. Writing gave me the space to slow down and carefully construct my sentences. It became a form of rehearsal for real-life conversations. By practicing through writing, I could experiment with phrasing, vocabulary, and tone, ensuring that my ideas were clear and impactful. This practice translated directly to my conversations. The more I wrote, the more natural it felt to express my thoughts verbally. My mind became accustomed to forming sentences in English, making it easier to respond in real time during discussions. For instance, when explaining a complex concept or sharing an opinion, I no longer hesitated as much, because the process of writing had trained my brain to organize ideas efficiently. Writing also helped me internalize new vocabulary and idiomatic expressions, which added richness and variety to my speech. To take it further, I began writing about hypothetical scenarios. I imagined myself in different situations, such as giving a presentation, discussing current events, or debating a topic of interest. By writing out these scenarios, I prepared myself for conversations that required more structured arguments or nuanced explanations. When similar situations arose in real life, I found myself more confident and articulate because I had essentially rehearsed them through writing. Writing wasn't just a tool for practice, it was a bridge between thought and spoken expression, a medium where I could refine and amplify my voice. Learning English transformed my life. It opened doors to opportunities one never thought possible. If I can do it, so can you. Remember, fluency isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Celebrate your small wins, embrace your mistakes, and keep going. You're capable of more than you realize. So, what are you waiting for? Start today. Take that first step. Your journey to fluency begins now, and I'll be cheering you on every step of the way.